started and I'll tell you a little bit about myself and what I'll be speaking on today. My presentation is called Medalist Mindset, and it's a leadership philosophy I created with a fellow Olympian. Her name's Lauren Gibbs, and we came to our Olympic medals at very different paths. But what we discovered were that there were these key sports performance traits that we had leveraged to be both successful as athletes and then to also find success in the business space. And we felt that there was this opportunity to really distill down those keys into a way that was approachable for others so that they could leverage them for success in whatever business or life goals they might have. So I want to start with this slide about myself. I like to start here because I imagine for everyone in this room, if we're usually known by our greatest hits. We go to our LinkedIn profiles or our social media profiles, and you see the things that people have accomplished. And if anyone's ever heard about me, it's these things up here. So 3-time Olympian, 2-time world bronze medalist, set American and world records, first American woman to ever medal in the women's 1500 at the Olympics. Things that I'm super proud of. Probably. Thank you. But I think the most interesting thing is the backstory. And especially for me, all of those things I accomplished were over the course of a career. I was top 10 in the world for a decade, and I feel from that story, there's important takeaways to share that can be useful to others, tools that they can maybe use in their own journey. And so I'm gonna go through the rest of the slides. I'll take you through the 5 medalist mindset keys with kind of stories from my own life to hopefully make them feel more relatable, make them feel more applicable, and hopefully inspire you to have tools to use in your own journey. So the first key is goals. And Lauren and I like to call this, what is your Olympics? And we like to use that phrase because in sports, Olympics is sort of dictated as the pinnacle goal. But I truly believe that in each person's life, there is something they can do at the highest level. And so I love to pose that question of what is your Olympics? And sometimes that answer to that question is tough, especially when you're trying to do something that there isn't a strong precedent for or that you don't have maybe a visual inspiration to aspire towards. And for me, that was definitely the case with sports. So even though I've spent my entire professional career as an athlete in the sporting space, when I was a little girl, the idea of athletes and girls joining forces never seemed possible. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and there were sports icons that I admired on television, but they played the NBA, the NFL, and the MLB. And so they were icons, but it wasn't something that I was ever going to be. But what I did instead was really try to lean into a couple things, my passions and my talents. I started out as a dancer, and even within dance, I did ballet first, but then I came into Irish dancing, and that's me competing. So everybody loves a good kid pick. But I leaned into Irish dancing because it had a competitive aspect. I would stand on stage in front of 1 to 3 judges alone. They would critique my every move, and it was kind of terrifying, but I also kind of loved that. I loved the thrill and the adrenaline of having to get up on stage and perform. I loved the feedback on where I ranked and how I stood against the competition that I could take home and use to work on self-improvement. And so I kept leaning into those spaces where I had that passion and I had that talent. When you think about success at the highest level, ultimately it's going to come with a lot of work. And so if you can find those things that just are naturally interesting to you, that you're naturally willing to lean into, the likelihood that you'll put in the work over the long term to get there is much higher. And so for me, even though I never wanted to be an athlete or thought I would be an athlete, it turned out that is kind of where my life led me. I ultimately got a full athletic scholarship to Duke, and that was sort of the beginning of what led to a professional athletic career. But the next slide that I share, the next key, is foundations. And this one's really important because no journey comes without setbacks. And for me, my first major setback in that professional athletic career was my senior season in college. I had just won NCAA indoors in the mile. I was set up to come out strong, finish strong, sign a shoe contract, and instead my senior season was cut short with a stress fracture in my left femoral neck. So I was on crutches, couldn't compete my final season. And to make it even worse, it was 1 year out from the 2008 Olympic trials, and that was the Olympic team that I was gonna go try and make, that was my big goal that was coming up next. The idea of foundations is when a setback happens, or when you're at the beginning of a journey towards whatever your big goal is, how do you understand, how do you get to the root cause of an issue so that you can sort of assess or address those challenges at the outset in hopes that they won't become barriers or roadblocks later. So in my case here, in this story, I was already injured. There was nothing I could do. I was 1 year out from the Olympics, and all I had was those 12 months to figure out how I could give myself a shot at making my first Olympic team. But my kind of prehab process, my foundation assessment process was, not just putting a Band-Aid on the issue and not trying to get back to training as quickly as possible. I mean, don't get me wrong, I was trying to get back to training as quickly as possible, but I understood that a stress fracture is a chronic injury. That meant that for years, something was off, and step after step, mile after mile, that little thing that had always kind of annoyed me here, I'd always felt a little bit of tightness in my hip, well, ultimately that had led to the stress fracture. So there was an opportunity to figure out what was that thing, what was that chronic thing that was wrong, and start to figure out how to address it so that as I did, after my bones were healed and I started to get back into training, it was less likely that that same injury would pop up again and get me stuck in this injury cycle. And so, from a sports perspective, that assessment included doing a leg length or a bone length scan to understand that my left tibia was 7 millimeters longer from a broken leg in kindergarten. And while I couldn't change my leg length difference, I could get orthotics and mechanically correct some of that difference. It also included creating a prehab routine. So understanding that my hips and core were my first line of defense, and if I could keep those muscles strong through daily actions, through exercises, then I would reduce the likelihood that things would get out of whack and the injury would come back. And then it was also building a team around myself. So creating a daily routine with a team around me that included, a lifting schedule, rehab or a maintenance plan, massage, chiropractic, all of those things, and then really committing to the process. And so as I shared at the beginning, I was 1 year out from the 2008 Olympic trials in crutches, written off by pretty much everybody, but committed to giving myself a shot at making that Olympic team, committed to showing up every day and putting in the effort. And the next slide you'll see is what ultimately happened.
First up today will be the women's 1,500-meter final, and that's Shannon Rowbury, the best 1,500-meter runner in the United States, the former Irish step dancer as a youth, who was an All-American at Duke, where she majored in filmmaking, and she's the favorite here today. Fifth. Jordan Hassay continues to trail the pack.
Well, this is shaping up to be a kicker's race as you see Trenair Clement second from the last with the glasses on in the back of the pack. That's not where Clement is supposed to be. Her coach, J.J. Clark, there she is. So said that she needs to be up front toward the top of this race, and right now, she is not in the mix.
Shannon Rowbury now has the lead. Kristen Worth-Thomas into second. Erin Donahue comes up into third. Here's the final lap about to unfold. And Shannon Rowbury starting to sprint clear of the field. Kristen Worth-Thomas is second. Erin Donahue is third.
Through the round, Shannon Rowbury showed that she'd be the class of the field. And believe it or not, a year ago, she had a stress fracture in her left hip. Her entire season was washed out, and now she stands less than 300 meters away from an Olympic berth.
Rowbury leads. Worth-Thomas second. Donahue third. Sarah Hall is fourth. And now here comes Usini into fourth place. But Shannon Rowbury all by herself in the final turn. Donahue closing in on Worth-Thomas for the second spot. Home straightaway looms, and Shannon Rowbury has the big lead. Kristen Worth-Thomas and Erin Donahue fighting for second and third, and Donahue edges ahead. Here's Rowbury in front, Donahue second, and Worth Thomas third. They hit the line. Shannon Rowbury wins. Aaron Donahue second. Kristen Worth Thomas is third.
As you can see by my face, I think I even surprised, no, I know I surprised myself by that race and how much I won in it. But as I look back, I recognize that, while I didn't expect to kind of blow away the competition, what I had done every day in showing, in that assessment of my foundations, in that commitment to showing up every day to put in the work, I had given myself a shot, and that shot ended up being a huge win. And, I think so the third key is mind, and I think about those challenge situations. And when you are in anything, the only thing that we can control is what is between our own ears. And when you are in a challenge situation, really focusing on controlling the controllables. The athletes in the room will know that phrase, but it's how do you bring it back to this moment here and now and focus on the things that you can do in the moment to give yourself a shot. It doesn't guarantee the outcome, but it is the only way that you can really take ownership of the moment that you're in and give yourself that focus on what you can do. So the fourth key is routine, and the previous slide, making my first Olympic team, that had been the goal. 1 in 500,000 people become an Olympian. I think that's 0.0016% of the world's population. But once you achieve a goal, you want more. And for me, I love Athlete Legacy Circle, the name of this event. I wanted to build a legacy. I wanted to do things that those statistics were hard to find for. I wanted to ultimately become a 3-time Olympian, first ever American Olympic medalist in the women's 1500. But to do that, you then, success, okay, maybe success could happen once on a fluke or on a chance, but sustained success requires behavioral traits, it requires a routine, and the next slide, which I'll talk about, which is team. One of the ways that I talk about routine is some simple things. Everybody has the same 24 hours, but why is it that some people seem to do so much more with them? And routine is a great example of that. And I like to take clients through this daily audit concept, which is really about kind of reclaiming your time and taking ownership of how you spend it. And it can be as simple as, on a piece of paper, you've got clarity on the goals you want, you have a sense of what you need to do to get there, write out what an ideal day or an ideal week might look like, and then actually doing the exercise just like a diet log or a nutrition log, and you would track your food. Well, track your day and do it without judgment, just do it with awareness, and figure out if there's opportunities where you can maybe reclaim some of that time. Are there apps on your phone that seem to suck you in and suddenly a half an hour has passed? Are there, operationally in the way that you're kind of setting up your schedule, are there better ways to do it? And so an example in my own life, when I did a daily audit, I was always feeling at one point just harried. I always felt like I had to go here and there, and I was short on time. And simply through my daily audit, I was understanding that in a given week, all of those commitments I had for treatment and training, if I just kind of stacked them better or relocated some of those meetings, that I could reclaim a few hours in a week, 3 hours. But if you add up those 3 hours over the course of the year, it becomes 6.5 days. And so I think it's so valuable to have that awareness of the time you spent, knowing it's your choice to spend it however you please, but understanding where you're spending it so that it's going towards the things that matter most to you. And the fifth key is team. Nothing can be achieved in a vacuum. The first 3 keys I talked about were a lot of internal orientation into what your goal is, who you are, why you want it. And the 4th and 5th keys exist because no goal can be accomplished in a vacuum. You have to bring it out into the world. And when it is out in the world, there'll be unexpecteds that come, like a stress fracture that I had. And your team ultimately is the one that helps you set your goals. They make sure they're appropriate. Maybe they make sure they're big enough. And they're also your first line of defense when something goes wrong. And so even though it's the last key, it really could be the first. It's kind of a flywheel effect. But when you're thinking about your team, It's really important, a couple things. One, to communicate what it is you're wanting to do, to communicate your goals in a way that people can understand and get on board. And it might be uncomfortable and they might have feedback, but those conversations are really educational, both for yourself and for them. And through those conversations, you might find that there's some people who were really, really important in your life in the past, but maybe aren't right for your future. And understanding that that's also okay. Because if you're gonna be going on this journey towards a really big, audacious goal, you need to have a team around you that's willing to, hold you up when you fall, that's willing to help you reorient on that path when needed. So I encourage you to really be thoughtful about that team. I love the quote, "You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." It's really true. They get in your head, and the things that they do, you see, and they, bring you up or bring you down. And so be really thoughtful about those people that you bring into your circle. So here at the end is an overview of those 5 keys that I had talked about. Whether you think of Medalist mindset as a full process that you go through or individual keys that you can pull out when in need, I hope that you've been able to hear from my presentation some tools that can be useful to you in whatever success you're wanting to go after and whatever goal you're trying to achieve. I do believe that success is a mindset, and I'm excited that I was able to share some of my perspective with you today. So thank you very much.